The first step to building any of my plans is to print off the individual plan sheets. These are located in the plans folder, and they're an image format that's easily printed. A lot of people try to build this directly from the SketchUp plan, but the SketchUp plan is just for reference. These drawings were put together showing all of the dimensions and the part names so that you can easily cut out everything and prep it ready to put together. There are individual part drawings and there are individual assembly drawings that go through each step of the assembly process. So by going through all of the parts drawings, you'll get all of the parts ready and cut out. Once you have all the parts made and properly machined, then you can start assembly. Okay, I printed out my template. It has 3 full-size patterns on it for laying out various parts of the sharpening jig. The first thing you got to do after you've printed it out is to make sure that it is printed out to the correct size. And I've got a measurement on here, 7 1/4 inches. You'll need to measure this line, and it should be 7 1/4 inches. That's the line across the bottom. Now that we've confirmed the size, I need to cut each one out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut it off right on this line. I have my ruler on that line and just cut it off. What that allows me to do is line it up on the edge of the plywood like this, so I don't have to make that cut. And then to glue these on, I'm just going to use one of these glue sticks. Here I've got the cam template from the same sheet. I'm just going to glue that onto a piece of 3/4 inch plywood. Before I do any cutting, I got to drill 3 holes. Those are pivot holes, 1 in the cam and 2 on the sides. The next thing to do is to cut out these slots. I figure the fastest and easiest way to do this is here on the drill press. I've got a 5/16 inch brad point bit in the drill, and I'm just going to drill a series of holes and then clean out the material between. That's one done. It doesn't have to be pretty. There is some space there, so the other way of doing this is to set it up on the router table and swing it through, say, a 5/16 inch bit, but I don't really think it's necessary for the hole to be that clean and that smooth. As you can see, this turned out pretty good. Okay, parts are cut out. I cut out and sanded the cam also. Just need to remove the paper. So I like this glue stick, using that, the paper comes off a lot easier. Probably the most critical part of this jig is this part right here. There's a slot cut in it, 2 holes this way, and then there are 2 holes on the edge here. It is very important that the holes that you drill in the edge here be accurate. If they're off slightly, they'll make this tip, and you won't get a straight grind on your chisel. So you'll need to spend extra time making sure that the holes that you drill here are absolutely as accurate as you can possibly get them. The slot at the top edge here is for this threaded rod. Now the threaded rod fits in here. Now I've got dimensions on the drawings for this slot, and it says 1/4 inch. You're really better off to make this a little bit smaller so that the threaded rod fits in there tightly. One of the very first things that you want to do after getting all your parts prepped is to put this part together. You'll slip the threaded rod into the slot and then mix up some epoxy and put it inside here to hold it in place. The next day, after the epoxy is set overnight, you need to draw some lines. I've got a detail here in the drawings that lines need to be drawn on the bottom here. What it does is it helps line up chisels and plane irons so that they're straight and square to the stone. Alright, well, I've got my assembly sheets printed off and lined up here, and I've also got all my parts together, everything I need to put this together, including the hardware. So I'm going to go through the steps as they're outlined here. First step is to attach these two parts. Now these are just getting glued, so some glue on here. It's not really necessary, but if you've got a pin nailer or small finish nails to hold it in place until you can get the clamps on it so it doesn't slide around, then that's better. That's the first one attached, and then get the second one on. Now with these parts in place, I can put clamps on it and let it dry for about a half an hour. Okay, that's had about a half an hour to set up. I can take the clamps off. And the next step is to attach parts D, C1 and C2. This is C1 and C2, and this is part D right here. They just get glued also. A little bit of glue. This one's a bit wider on this side. You gotta pay attention to that. That's on the side with the hole. And each one to hold in place. Now I can glue this part on. Okay, it's just to clamp it up again and let it dry for another half an hour. Alright, well, step number 3 we have already done. That was to install the threaded rod into this part right here. So we'll move on to step 4. And that's to take this part, and here's where you want to pay attention to the orientation and have the marks that you put on it earlier facing down. I'm going to take one side piece, bottom piece, the other side piece, and you need to make a mark to line up where they go. You got 3 1/8 inches here is where the side parts start, so put a mark there, put a mark here, and then these get glued and clamped on as well. And this part is a little bit tricky because you have to get this part in. Then I can get a couple clamps on here. Alright, now this has had a chance to dry, so remove the clamps. Alright, so moving on to step 5, I'm going to get the fender washers and the 1/4 inch wing nuts and thread those onto the threaded rod. Then take the 2 1.5-inch screws and drive those in here. And you drive these in until they're just snug. This needs to rotate like that to adjust the angle, so these need to be tight but not over tightened. Alright, with this in place, the next step is to take the clamp bar, which you made before, and put the 1.5-inch machine screws through, like so, and then put those through the holes in the cradle. Take 3/16-inch washers and the 3/16-inch wing nuts, and thread those on. Well, with the tool cradle complete, I can move on to step 7. Remove the clamps from the base. And then we take these strips and the cam, the locking cam, and put those in place. The locking cam is simple. It's a 1 1/4-inch screw. Gets driven into the base and snugged up. The cam needs to rotate, so this should be tight but not over tightened. Once again, I'm just going to put a couple of pins and then use spring clamps to clamp it. Now to line up the last one, I'm going to use the stone that I'm going to be putting in here. One thing to be aware of with stones like this is that they may be different on the top than they are on the bottom. This one is actually wider on the bottom than it is on the top. Make sure that you're aware of that when you line this up, otherwise you won't get the stone in. So I use that like that, and then flip it over to make sure it still fits. You can see it's actually loose in that way. So put some glue on here. That in place. It's a good idea to leave it a little bit slack. And then put a couple of pins in to hold it. And some more spring clamps. Alright, with the glue dried on the strips, I removed the clamps. The screw that holds the cam in place, if your plywood is a little bit thin, it might be sticking through the bottom here a bit. Just want to take a file and file that down a bit. Like that. And so it won't be digging into your top. Another thing is that you can cover the bottom here with a non-slip type coating, or you can put a strip on here to clamp it into a vise so it doesn't move around. It's fairly important that it stays steady while you work with it. Okay, we're ready for final assembly now. First step is to get the stone in place like that, and then rotate the cam to lock it in place so it doesn't move. Then you'll slide the tool cradle in and it should fit in the slot easily. And if it doesn't, if it's too tight, you can sand this down on the bottom here a little bit to get it to fit better. But it should be a good close fit so it doesn't move around too much. Also, take some Vaseline. Some people like to use wax, but I prefer to use Vaseline for stuff like this. And get it in there and work it into the wood. Take some and work it into the plywood on the top and on the bottom of this. And that's what you're looking for. You're looking for it to move in and out nice and smoothly like that. So that's it. It's finished, ready to use. In another video, I'll show how to set it up and how to use it properly. Thanks for watching.